Cypress, the counterintelligence podcast, hosted by IXN Solutions, the company you turn to for corporate counterintelligence expertise and creators of 351X.
And we are live.
Traci, that was so much better than Mike Die in the previous episode. Applause.
Thank you.
Hey, so here we are, part 2. We still have CW5 retirees, Mike Die, Shawn Michaud, Glenn Jones, and Traci Goodwin. We're not going to waste any time because we still got a lot of questions to get through in our part 2, so we're going to jump right into it. Scott, what do you think?
I agree. Let's get rocking and rolling.
All right, let's do it. Question number 1, part 2. From your experience, how do you differentiate between the senior warrant officer advisor and a command chief warrant officer roles? And really, why are these positions, why are they necessary? And how do you personally approach each? The order: Glenn, Shawn, Traci, Mike. Glenn, over to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. So yeah, this is one of those near dear to my heart, and I know, like Shawn said earlier, this will kick up some spurs in somebody's saddle out there. And so I'm going to start by saying I can't do it justice in this limited amount of time that we have here. And so I'm going to invite anyone listening to this podcast that is so indifferent to my opinion on this to reach out to me. Please reach out to me and let's have a one-on-one discussion about our differences on this. Why? Because I'm going to share something I really haven't said to any of you. I don't think individual. Maybe I have. Mike and I used to talk when I'd be driving from Tampa sometime. Maybe I shared some frustration, but I retired from the Army, gave the Army over 40 years of service, and I retired with a little bit of this frustration that CW, in this case, warrant officers out of cohort, and then CW5s specifically within the cohort of warrant officers are still way beyond recognition across the Army and due recognition and courtesy when it comes to simple things like, hey, Glenn Jones is retiring from the Army after 40.6 years of service. Do you think that 4-star of a combatant command might actually acknowledge that, right? Because guess what? I knew when I retired that I had more time in service than many of our 4-stars. So I'm just sharing a little bit of frustration there that kind of gets to this question. So it's very important that we differentiate between the senior warrant officer advisor and the command chief warrant officer. And here's the boilerplate of why. And again, I invite folks to challenge me on this one-to-one, reach out to me. Senior warrant officer advisor, very important position. Typically, you have a full-time job in your MOS. For us, that's counterintelligence, but typically you have a full-time job in your MOS. You are stressed to no end doing whatever your job is in that MOS, right? It can be a CW4 or CW5, but it can also be a CW3 or even a CW2 because that's the most senior warrant officer available to that commander at echelon. So if you're in a company level and the company commander has warrant officers employed and he or she wants to go to one warrant officer to get advice about how to interact, deal with, handle whatever with warrant officers, or learn warrant officer PME, or learn about how he or she should evaluate that warrant officer, then it might very well be a CW2 or a CW3 that becomes the senior warrant officer advisor to that commander. Think about what things I just referenced that you, warrant officer, senior warrant officer, get to educate, mentor, train, and develop this officer on. Case in point, 2-star general looked at me in a particular meeting. I was a CW4 at the time, and said, Chief, say that again. And I said what I said, which was a representation of a warrant officer valued for their career and their ability to get promoted. And that 2-star general said to me, well, I'm the commander for all. And so I see it like this. And I said, ma'am, respectfully, here's the difference. And I laid it out. And she said, I never thought about it like that. You are correct in those differences, as I understand it, but I'm going to acknowledge right here in this room amongst this audience that I don't know. And I said, ma'am, that's why I get to be your CW4. I get to tell you what it takes to get to this level as a warrant officer. And I said, ma'am, you're always the commander, and every commander is a commander. But do you all warrant officers go back and look at your history? And Mike is far better at history than I am. Go back and look at your history and look at the years when warrant officers were left behind in the pay grade table for promotion. I mean, for higher pay for decades. We were forgotten about. You know why that was? Because they forgot that you were officers. They forgot that you are a cohort that needed representation, right? The command sergeant major took care of the NCO corps and enlisted corps. The general took care of all the old grades. Oh, and we forgot about the warrant officers. So you need to be involved. If you're a senior warrant officer advisor, you need to advise the commander. Now, what are you advising the commander on? Mostly warrant officer centric matters in that job. You're a full-time MOS, a part-time advisor. We all have been there and know that I'm so busy doing my full-time job, I don't have time for my part-time job, which then creates a divide in how I spend my time. That's the senior warrant officer advisor. And again, this is I know it's a snippet, right? So now let's go to the command chief warrant officer and what sets that apart. The command chief warrant officer, CW4, CW5, typically, right? Full-time job, full-time advisor, full-time focused on the enterprise of the organization. Notice I said the enterprise of the organization. If you're a brigade command chief, you're looking at the entire enterprise of that brigade, right? To make it better, make it more efficient, etc. And oh, by the way, I'm still a CI guy, so I am focused 100% on the counterintelligence as an enterprise across the Army. That's why I personally made it sure that as the command chief warrant officer, I went to MI Corps at Fort Huachuca and represented counterintelligence issues along with the DAG2 Traci Goodwin position and Traci when she was in the position, that we were an INSCOM, right? We were a synergized effort on counterintelligence as an enterprise. Oh, by the way, got all the other CW5s to start investing their time at Fort Huachuca, working along with you great colleagues and Wendy Wayman and Kevin Boughton and others, that all CW5s started making it their effort to go to Fort Huachuca and invest in the warrant officer training branch, invest in their MOS schools out there, et cetera, et cetera. That's what a command chief warrant officer is there for, to look at it as an enterprise. The organization as an enterprise, great. Hey, I would say this: in a traditional Army, there's three at the top. There's a command sergeant major, the commander, and it should be a command chief warrant officer. There's three at the top. They have three different perspectives. They are trained, educated, and grown differently, which means there's going to be some bias in there. So I need my command chief warrant officers to look at the entire enterprise and bring that to the table. In an organization, non-traditional military organization, where we operate most with civilians in the workforce, you need a senior civilian advisor. So you got you got a commander and three advisors now. And those three advisors need to look at the entire enterprise, but they will all be biased to their experiences. And so they will represent those well. But when you are not there, warrant officers, I assure you, there's some great commanders out there, but they are not always operating your best interest, and it's not out of malice. It's because they didn't think about us for years, that we were left behind on the pay table. And so I'm using that to punctuate my point. Why did we get left behind? It's because we were forgotten. And I retired with some frustration that warrant officers are still forgotten. That's why I'm so happy that we finally got the Army Staff Senior Warrant Officer, now Command Chief Warrant Officer of the United States Army position in there, so that we are not forgotten at that level. Thank you. Over.
Yeah, Glenn, I love it. And I know that you missed out the opportunity to talk about it with our last fireside chat. I mean, you exude the passion, and thank you for leading from the front. There's nobody better positioned to help Huachuca than a warrant officer through is it SSBT, whatever it is. I forget off the top of my head.
CTSSBs.
CTSSB. Thank you. See, I need to be corrected. The CTSSB. There's nobody better positioned to help train the future force than the warrant officers executing who have mastered the craft. Thank you, Glenn. We are up to Shawn, please.
So I want to lead off with saying I think you deliberately put me after Glenn to stoke a fight on this, Jeremy. And to Glenn, I was just traveling to Tampa, and I can assure you, your parking space is still not there. So it's still not available in that garage because I was looking for it because I was going to take it to go into an interaction. It's still not there. So all joking aside on that, hey, I think at the last episode that we did this, I think it was episode 61. I came out the gate pretty critical of it, but also pretty supportive, right? As a non-command chief warrant officer, but I've watched how both Mike and Glenn have shaped the environment for years to come from those positions, and I find that critically important. So that command chief warrant officer should be engaged, not just a bolt on to the command team, but you should be really, really engaged, driving that positive organizational change, enabling CI activities, protecting the technical health of the force, setting CI standards, aligning talent, and really translating that commander's intent into repeatable systems that scale across the enterprise. That's what we do. And I watch Glenn and Mike do it. And I think that's important. As a CW5, as a senior technical, warrant officer or senior technical advisor, your center of gravity is your depth, right? You're solving hard problems that really resonate and at the tactical edge, operating, those operational effects. Both are critically important. And here's what I challenge CW5s to do. Do them both. But let's shed this I was a command chief warrant officer, I have an up or out mentality like the O grades. I have to continue to progress. I don't think that's it. If you've had the opportunity to lead as a command chief warrant officer, you should be taking that experience and going somewhere where you're enabling the force again to get after the adversary at the tactical edge. So I think it's critically important we do both roles. I've seen them both work, and I've seen them both, have dysfunction at times. So I think we have to pursue both to be effective in the career field. Over.
Yeah, good point, Shawn. Thank you. Traci.
Well, I'm going to go back a little bit to our first Army Chief Warrant Officer, Dave Williams, who was a former CI agent who became a pilot, and some of the criticisms that were slung at him because there were certain things that I guess warrant officers thought shouldn't be important. And it was, some of the things were, we should be saluted and we should be in those offices with those GOs giving them advice. And he looked at, one of the things that he did look at that everybody I think was appreciative of was the pay inequity. And he did a lot of work in trying to bring that pay equity up to where it should be. And he looked at customs and courtesies as well. A lot of people felt like, because we're warrant officers, we talk to each other. Hey, Dave. Hey, Shawn. He was one of those warrant officers who felt that we should honor the customs and courtesies that we have, that are part of our history, that are part of our customs and courtesies all the way back to drill and ceremony. So he got a lot of flack, but he also was not physically located with the Chief of Staff of the Army and the Sergeant Major of the Army. When I went to see him in his office, he was out in a corner around the corner. So he did not in proximity have that level of closeness that the Sergeant Major did, that the Sergeant Major of the Army did. and I think there were some growing pains with that, because he felt like he was being minimalized. And maybe it was because of the space issue. They'd never had one. But nonetheless, it made him feel like he wasn't part of that team, that Sergeant Major of the Army, Chief of Staff of the Army team. And when he retired, there was not another CW5 that took that position. It was a CW4. And I was in the Pentagon, and he was an administrative warrant officer, a 42 Alpha. And so for the length of time that he was sitting in that seat, we did not hear a whole lot from him. And I think part of that was because there are so many CW5s in the Pentagon. He's a CW4, didn't have the confidence to come out and take charge of that position, because it's a position. And I will say, when I found out that that was happening, I was a little disgruntled. I was like, who the heck is that? Who is this person? So the evolution of the position of a command chief warrant officer and a senior warrant officer of the Army started with that and has evolved to what it is now. I appreciate at the brigade and division level how that works. In the Pentagon, it's a little bit different, because at least within the G2, there are so many W5s in that arena that don't sit in the G2's office. And there was an attempt to actually put one in his office. And if you know this man, if you know Dean, he does not want to give up a warrant officer. He did not want to give up any of his warrant officers. And neither did any of the other senior executives. Ultimately, the decision became that we were going to have one of the warrant officers do double-hatted duty, adhere to all of duties and responsibilities that were part of their specialty, and also have the ear of the G2. That didn't work out. It was a pilot project, and it just kind of died on the vine. The next attempt was to make sure that we had the voice of the G2. The G2 has an office call once a month with the 06s. He has an office call once a month with the 04s. Why not have an office call with all the warrant officers in the G2? They're mostly 4 or 5s anyway. We tried that, trying to get that on a battle rhythm. It started out, and then it kind of died as well. But what I do see in the advantage of having a senior warrant officer advisor, and of course that's the senior person, whomever that happens to be, being able to give that advice and assistance to their supervisor and a commander, and then having a chief warrant officer in the command space, I think there are advantages. And of course, Glenn has spoken about, Wendy and Kevin Boughton. They were the first two at INSCOM, and how it helped to synergize and consolidate the warrant officer opinions, and how we spoke as one voice when we went places, especially Fort Huachuca, as Glenn said, how we were able to leverage our experience and those positions to influence and at least have the ear of the G2 and of the commanders. And my only experience has been in the G2, so it's a little bit different, but I do understand and appreciate, especially being called the senior warrant officer, in CI, just because I sat at the Pentagon. I understand being able to walk into Dean's office and say, hey, sir, this is what's going on. Or, are you sure you want to do that? Or, hey, I got this thing I need to talk to you about. His difference was that he welcomed all of his warrant officers into his office, but being able to have that accessibility is valuable. It is valuable. And so I I haven't seen it up close and personal at the division and brigade level. I have seen it at the Pentagon. What I will say about that, and oh, by the way, the senior warrant officer, or the chief warrant officer for the Army in the Pentagon would call all the W5s, all the senior warrant officer advisors together once a month. And we would have, it would either be virtual, we had luncheons. And so there was also that synergy, because I'll tell you, in the Pentagon, we all go into our corridors and we go into our holes, and we don't come out until it's time to go home, or it's time to go to the restroom, or it's time to go to lunch, if we didn't bring our lunch. So I did appreciate being able to sit down or have a conversation, or at least have a virtual venue with them once a month to talk about some of the issues that we had, and be able to help each other in that way, in the same way that we as CI warrant officers help each other and mentor each other and depend on each other and can ask those questions. It broadened our scope of knowledgeability about all the other departments in this Pentagon. And that's all I got for now.
Thank you, Traci. The history with it and everything. Shawn, go ahead, please.
I was going to say, I kind of like something Traci just said there about customs and courtesy, and people get opinion about that, opinionated about it. Like we were all opinionated about our Rising Eagle and losing the warrant officer Brown. That was pretty emotional for us as warrant officers. And nowadays, back in the day, warrant officers didn't salute warrant officers, and they've kind of infused that into the new culture where junior warrants salute senior warrants, and people may be for it or against it, but what I see there is opportunity. Every warrant that I saw walking around the last job that I had at a combatant command who saluted me, I would stop and introduce myself to that W1 and give them an opportunity to talk to me and get to know them. Right. So there's benefits to these things that change, that gets brought in. We don't always have to push against it. You can just find the right way to say, okay, hey, I'm a warrant. We should all know each other. That's what it's about. Boom. New warrant salutes me. Stop. Hey, I'm Shawn. Who are you? Tell me what you do. Let's get to know each other. Now we know each other. We don't need to be so formal. Let's have some good conversations and stay in touch, right? Those are good things to do. So you just sparked that memory, Traci, and I wanted to share that with the group about opportunities when things get, change happens and things come in. There's always opportunity, right? Over.
Yeah, and I think, not just the technical expertise we bring in as a technician, it's the spider web of individuals that we have access to. And speaking of which, poor segue, Mike, as the president of the Warrant Officer Association, I'm going to give you the baton to close it out.
Well, thanks. So, as Traci mentioned, we talked about this, episode 61. I'm an advocate, obviously, having been a two-time brigade level command chief warrant officer. And I'll sum it up to this. You guys have some great points. But it comes down to a couple of things. And when we talk about counterintelligence warrant officers, larger MI Corps, and then the Army at large with warrant officers and command chief warrant officers, I think within the MI Corps, within CI for sure, we're our own worst enemy, right? We sabotage ourselves, right? New idea comes up and somebody doesn't appreciate it, somebody doesn't like it, then they go around and will denigrate it, and takes forever to make it work. I would offer a couple things historically, right? So the National Guard has had command chief warrant officers since the late 80s. Every state has had a command chief warrant officer that represents all the warrant officers within their state. There was a push in the early 90s by the National Guard Bureau to get rid of it, and it was quite an interesting read, and they lost, and they maintained it. They proved the worth of what that singular command chief warrant officer did for those states. So that's been around for a long time. Special Forces and Aviation have had command chief warrant officer positions for years. It's only really new to the rest of the force. It works very well within the Special Forces and in the aviation communities. Why? Because they have scoped it. They are involved in their training. They're involved in their talent management. They're involved in their operations, right? Because that's what they do. And they set it up the way they wanted to, and that's what they've done. Then you try to blow that out a little bit on the bigger Army scale, and every different proponents do it a little bit differently. I can tell you from the MI side, when Kevin Boughton was at INSCOM, and we've had, Aaron Anderson out at Huachuca before he became the chief warrant officer of the Army. It's a fight for them, right? In order to get our own brethren and sisters on board to say this is a good thing for us. The CAC, the Combined Arms Center, has a command chief warrant officer. T2 T2Com has a command chief warrant officer at a 2-star level. So there is relevancy and there is worth, but I think it all comes down to one or a couple things. Personality, the individual that's holding that position in there for the right reasons. It's not a title. It's not because I want this job. What impact is that person going to have to further their command and to further the soldiers, civilians, and the folks that are working underneath it? That to me is key. And then it's all about, I've said this before, knowing the difference between being present and having a presence. And no matter where we sit, whether you're command chief warrant officer, you're a brand new W2 or a brand new W1, it's all about having presence and knowing where to be, when to be. And so you can have that voice to help inform and shape those commanders on intelligence oversight decisions that are being made at a small level, right? So if you're not there or you're not seen to be value added, then we're going to be forgot about. And I think we as warrant officers generally, a lot of us have we've shot ourselves in the foot. I think it's getting better. I think that it's not going away. MI is kind of leading the front. The other proponents are, they're getting there. But a lot of it's, I would offer, it's our peers. You know, I'm one of the, when Traci and I retired last year, we were the most senior warrant officers in the Army, active duty. We were. Glenn, when he retired, was. So those peers below us, they've retired now too. So it's a new culture of younger warrants, brand new W5s, hard charging 3s and 4s, that this is what they know, and they're going to take that mantle and they're going to run with it. And so I think it does, for all the reasons that Shawn said, and for Glenn and Traci, this is a good thing, but there's growing pains with it. It's all about what the individual does in that role. Do something, be present, because if you do nothing and you're just there for the parking space, then you are ineffective and it's not doing anybody any good. Over.
Mike, I love that. It's not just a parking space. You need to be present and you need to help the other warrant officers out there. And well said, Mike. Truly appreciate it. I'm going to pass it over to Scott for the next question.
All right, gang. So for this next question, I'm going to have to ask y'all to go into a little bit of role play mode, right? Because I know that y'all have storied, esteemed careers and you're all happy, with where you are in life today, right? So this will not apply to you now, right? But imagine that you're a young, high-speed, counterintelligence professional, and you have an opportunity to go, to wherever you want to go, in the community for your counterintelligence career, right? So would Army be your first choice? And if so, why? And what would that be? What would be the reasoning behind, the guidance that you would give, or if you were that person that you would make that decision, is what it boils down to. What factors would influence your decision on whether or not you came to the Army or went elsewhere? And we are going to start with Shawn, then it will go to Traci, then Mike, then Glenn.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Scott, for that question. Just like retirement or the decision to serve, past one tour, those are all deeply personal decisions, I believe, right? And for me personally, I would say yes, the Army would still be my absolute top choice. If you listen back to episode 41, I talk about needing a first sergeant in my life. PFC Michaud had a lot of growing up to do, and I did that in the Army. It was an absolutely amazing way to learn and grow and develop. I think some of these questions occasionally come from a place of tension with folks, like they think they could be doing more, and they probably can. But these tensions, they may feel like they're new. They might just be new to the people who are experiencing them, right? They've always existed. So, have there been times in the Army where I feel that I'm spending more time and energy navigating the institution than fighting the enemy? Probably. That may have existed. But really, that's the burden of leadership and the burden of working in jobs of consequence. That's what comes with it. So those frictions, they happen. But I'll tell you what, all those things have taught me, right? You learn how to lead. You learn how to influence. You learn resiliency. You learn how to get things done in complex systems. And it really, really makes you better. So for me, in any way, shape, or form, if you're younger coming into it, hey, this is a demanding career field. If you're in it and it feels hard, try to leave the institution of the Army and counterintelligence better than you found it. But I wouldn't change a thing. The United States Army, entirely through counterintelligence in my case, made me the person that I am today. And I wholeheartedly believe in that, soldier for life and the motto when I came in, right? Be all you could be, wholeheartedly. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Shawn. Traci, how about your take?
Well, I'd have to echo Shawn in a lot of ways. It's a very, very personal decision, and I will say that I prayed and meditated when I made the decision, before I made the decision to come into the Army, because I looked at every service and I realized that the Army was going to give me what I most needed, but more important, and it included paying for my college loans. And I think I spoke about that a little bit in episode 75. But when I looked at the other services, it just didn't meet the needs that I had at the time. And being able to have a choice of what I wanted to do was very important to me. That was something the other services couldn't give me. And I don't know what it looks like today, but looking back on my decision, and if I had to make the same decision today, I'd have to do a little bit more research to find out which one would meet my needs the most. But again, I had to look at my father's legacy of being in the military. He was in the military for 30 years. He retired as a sergeant major. I was an Army brat. I knew what that life felt like and looked like. And my first husband and my late husband were both soldiers. They were both in the Army. So as I look back on the opportunities that I had, especially in counterintelligence, the opportunities for training, for assignments, for the exposure to all these great people and learning so much, and the opportunity to become a warrant officer for that matter, I would probably, after serious thought, meditation, and prayer, given the current situation, I probably would still choose the Army.
Sounds like you bleed green.
Long time.
Right.
I've bled green for a long time.
Thanks, Traci. Mike, you're next up.
Yeah, so another great question. When I wrote my answer down, it said yes. And then I realized, okay, I have to do more than just yes. So, like Glenn and like you, Scott, when we three of us came in the Army, we came in a different MOS. We weren't counterintelligence. We changed into that, after our initial tour. So I think part of it is, and in hindsight being obviously 2020, trying to look at it as a young person today, the mindset of a young person today is totally different than we were growing up, I think, because of the information available, YouTube, Facebook, whatever's out there. It's totally different. When I came in, I needed to grow up. I was, like I said, my episode 12, right? From Wyoming, 18-year-old kid, I needed to get out of Wyoming. The Army afforded me that opportunity. I didn't have anybody around me in proximity that served in the Army. My dad did, 30 years before that, but nothing of any real significance that meant anything to me personally. So I just wanted to do something. I fell into, once I realized, okay, I didn't want to stay in the commo job that I was doing, and I needed to do something else, I was able to switch. And by luck, happenstance, hard work, I eventually made what I thought was a pretty successful career. I think it's a little different today with today's younger generation, that there's an expectation management that expects that when I come in, I'm going to do great things, and this is going to be just the greatest thing, and I'm going to have control all over that. And I think that's something just has to be tempered. As I talk to my kids and I talk to youth, it's like, hey, it's a little bit different. You got to come in and do your time. It's not going to be perfect, right? You want to come in and serve because you're in the Army. You just happen to be a counterintelligence agent, or you're going to be an infantry person, or whatever that's going to be. You're serving the greater good for being in the Army. That's first. And then make the most out of your career, and you find your passion doing that, whatever that is. And I think it leads into later. It's like, if that's not what you want to do after you've been doing this for several years, then find what that is and go do that. You don't want to stay 20 years in the Army and be a disgruntled, unhappy, soldier for the rest of it. That's no fun for anybody. So all that to say, yeah, I wouldn't change anything, But I also like to think that, I recognize that it's different for today's younger folks, and what appeals to them may be different than what it was than when I came in.
Roger that. Thanks, Mike. And Glenn, what's your take on this topic?
Yes, as Mike said, yes. Sign me up. This is I looked at the question and I actually misread a little bit there, and I started thinking about actual assignments in the Army. So anyway, find your passion, right? That's where I'm at with this. Find your passion, and go back to episode 24 for me to listen about how I found my passion, and to laugh about how I always say I couldn't keep a job, so I got fired from 2 other MOSs and found my passion in counterintelligence. And so that absolutely yes. And why Army? Because candid, blunt opinion is Army does counterintelligence the best. Again, set aside the criminal law enforcement stuff. If that's where your passion is at, then don't come to Army counterintelligence, because that's not what Army counterintelligence is doing, right? So NCIS, OSI might be the better answer, or Army CID if you want to stay Army, right? But when you talk about counterintelligence, Army does it the best. Army, yes, and Army needs to continue to evolve. ACI Command or First Intel Command, whatever we're calling it nowadays, is absolutely the right direction, so that we can keep our Army counterintelligence professionals focused on Army counterintelligence. So that's where it's at for me, and I'll just keep that one short, because I see Army counterintelligence as the model, and I still to this day am just stoked by counterintelligence, specifically Army counterintelligence, and so that's where the passion is at. Over.
Right on. Good. I'm glad that we're all still the Army, man. Well, I will tell you that, halfway through my career, I came to, kind of a point, where I was like entertaining the possibility of, jumping out to, the Bureau or the Secret Service, or all looking at, listed the old pros and cons, and boom, I came to the same conclusion. Stayed green, drove forward, and ended up loving my career just as much as the rest of you do. So, all right, Jeremy, on to you.
Awesome. And Scott, I'm glad you continued with the Army as well, since we had got to work together. But in the same vein, this question is very similar. But I want to caveat a couple of different things. If we look at what's happening across the whole of government society right now, the defense industry base, corporate America, even the NFL, they're all looking for counterintelligence professionals. Right now, there's legislation in New Hampshire. There's legislation in Florida for CI teams and CT teams to be created. There are so many opportunities out there for counterintelligence professionals. And since you guys are retired Army warrant officers with decades of service in counterintelligence, subject matter expertise, and the lightsabers of counterintelligence, how do you keep talent in the Army when there are so many opportunities elsewhere in the government and industry? In the order, Mike, Glenn, Shawn, Traci. Mike, please.
Yeah, that's a good follow-up to the other one. It's Glenn hit at it, and I'll say it again. It's passion. Find that passion. I think that with so many other opportunities out there, money, isn't everything, right? Assignment location isn't everything. What's important to the individual, right? As we all went through a retirement process, we all remember that class, and you got to talk about, hey, I have a choice about where I want to live. What's important? Was it money? Is it family? Is it location? It's the driving time. Kind of thinking the same thing as young agents going through their career. What's important to them? They may not know really what's important to them yet. They just have a general idea based on their experiences. But I would offer that it's never going to be perfect, right? Wherever they go, there's always going to be processes and bureaucracy and rules wherever you go. So the thought that, well, I'm going to go somewhere else and it's going to be so much better is kind of, I think, a little bit short-sighted. I go back to it's the Army. For me, I said there's so many opportunities. Do I want to continue serving in what is the greatest, military installation organization in the world? Yes. It didn't matter that I was doing counterintelligence or I was an enlisted or as a warrant officer. I think it's a deeply personal investment and discussion that all soldiers have to have and all agents have to have. And then do what, you feel is right for your family in those situations at the time. We offered, early outs, and we offered, bonuses to re-enlist and to keep folks, because the Army knows that it needs talent. And throwing money at a problem is not a solution. It's a short-term fix. It's a Band-Aid. And I think we've proven over time that's not a fix. So it's really, unfortunately, it's not a yes or no answer. It's whatever that individual is wants to do. And then I hope they would have a mentor, have peers that they would talk to, right? Don't make this decision alone. Talk to seniors, talk to others that come through, and gather that information to make a well thought out, talk to your spouse and family. What do you want to do? And then go down and then make that, again, your passion.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Mike. Passion. If you're not passionate about the craft, well, then first of all, you need to find a different craft, because this is not a 9-to-5 job. The adversary doesn't sleep, and neither can counterintelligence professionals. And to be honest, that's what drove me through a lot of my career. But Glenn, the baton, sir, please.
Yes, I'm only adding to what Mike said, and perhaps couch it just slightly different terminology. But Mike hit the nail on the head with this. I looked at this question and I said, yeah, I laugh, because how many times in our career in various positions, all of us, Scott on both sides of the military and civilian world, have we been focused on this challenge of recruiting talent, sustaining a talent pool, and all the metrics associated with it, and then coming up with incentives to try to improve our posture, right? And as they say, improve our foxhole as it relates to manning issues or again, recruiting issues, right? Man, train, equip, Traci's all, that was her life for the last few years, right? And really at the end of the day, like Mike said, you can throw bonuses around and money around, but here's the bottom line: life happens. And so when life happens, people make choices and decisions that are very, very personal to them, their situation, and their family. And so if you don't have the Army core values, right? That's what I love about the Army. We got these core values that says commitment, right? Selfless service, honor, duty, right? If you don't have those for the Army, and you don't have the passion that comes with those, there's no bonus that's going to keep you in. There's no assignment that's going to keep you in. The assignment might keep you there for the assignment, right? The bonus might keep you there until you spend that money. But at the end of the day, Mike hit the nail on the head. We can't buy honor to the country. We can't buy commitment to the nation. That being said, I would offer to think bigger about service to the nation. This is a conversation I have all the time with young people who are considering coming in the military, vice doing other things, right? And I say, hey, look, I listen, I hear them out, and I say, hey, well, first of all, why do you even think about joining the military? What are you looking for, right? What do you want out of the military? And then I talk to them about pros and cons of their thought process and the military as it relates to that thought process. Because at the end of the day, it's a matchmaking business as well, right? It's like, hey, does the Army work for you, and do you work for the Army? Right? It's two sides of that coin. So think bigger about what service to this nation through the military does for you in the long term, in the life term. Even if you say, I'm going to do one tour, get out, go to the FBI, go wherever you choose to go. Think about it in the long term, right? Vice not doing it, right? Think about it in comparison to all these agencies out there that are throwing all this money around. So again, if money is your motivator, you're going to find that somewhere else, right? But then you think about the life of that, and you think about the lifetime benefits of that, right? Or not. But at the end of the day, it is a very personal decision, because life happens. And in that moment, in that time, we make life-changing decisions that are best for us and our family. Over.
Yeah, Glenn, I think if anybody that's in the Army and doing counterintelligence for the Army or any service expects to be a millionaire, let's chat about that because it's probably the wrong reason to be doing counterintelligence for any type of agency out there. But Shawn, the baton is yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is springboarding off the previous conversation. It's a calling, right? There's a lot. It's personal choice. It's a calling. You got to decide. There are things that impact it. I think command climate and culture impact it. I think people doing the jobs that they signed up to do certainly impacts it, right? That's key. I know there was a study that was done on job satisfaction, right? Soldier readiness studies. I think it was a behavioral science thing out of Ramsey, following like Gulf War and stuff like that. And it says the most stressful thing for a soldier is performing, outside their MOS, right? You got to keep them engaged. So that keeps people in the Army. But the reality of it is I think it comes down to being a calling. It's a personal choice. If you choose to do so, it's great. If you choose to do one tour, it's great. And you want to be engaged and do your job. So to quote the former coach of the next Super Bowl champs, do your job.
Well played, Shawn. Well played. Engaged. I think you're onto something here, right? When I look and think about counterintelligence, you're going to be engaged in the Army. The adversary doesn't sleep, and so the Army, you're going to be engaged in a fight every day, and that doesn't happen in every job. Traci, over to you, ma'am.
Well, I look back on my experience, and I did make a decision to join the Army because it had what I needed and it had what I wanted. And of course, there was the legacy portion of that as well. But I also thought that I was going to do my first enlistment and I was out. They're going to pay my college loans off in my first 4 years of enlistment, and I'm out of here. Because that's when I will start what I used to call my real career. And I realized once I got in that it was something that I really loved. And there were some twists and turns in those first 4 years that brought me to counterintelligence, because I came in and I signed up as an interrogator. I got the language training to my advantage, and then I went to AIT, and that's where I switched. But I realized that was where I belonged. And if I decided to make it a career, it was going to be a decision that was based on my love of country, wanting to, contribute. And also, to me, it's about the people. And so when people are making decisions on what they're going to do with the rest of their lives, a lot of it has to do with how we care for the person, the individual, and how we make them feel. And what I found in the military was a sense of camaraderie and honestly, trauma bonding in a lot of instances. And if I was talking to someone who was trying to decide, and how do we get, when there are so many other offers out there, I think I would actually appeal to what Glenn was saying about love of country. That's number one. And number two, if you need a stepping stone, and most young folks do, they need a leg up, they need a stepping stone. The Army or the military will give you an opportunity to figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life. And if you are going to enlist for 2 years or 4 years, of course, there are motivations. I don't know. I think the college loan repayment is still a thing for certain MOSs. I'm not sure. But there are other opportunities and training that you're going to get that you're not going to get anywhere else. And the Army is partnering with industry, with the civilian population for training, for internships, for all kinds of programs. And if you really do the research, it's a win-win in most instances. But of course, again, it's a personal decision, and you really need to think long and hard. Number one, about dismissing it out of hide, or number two, just jumping into it. It needs to be a deliberate decision. And if you find out that you made a mistake, you have the opportunity to end it. proper policy, do it the right way, but no one is going to force you to stay if it's just not what you want. But it has to be it is an avocation. It is not a vocation, for sure. And you have to love it, because you've got to take all the good and the bad. But anywhere you work, you're going to have to take the good with the bad. And the one thing about being in the military, if you have a bad leader, either you're going to be gone or they're going to be gone eventually. And you can reinvent yourself a lot, as many times as you want to. Over.
Yeah, well said, Traci. I thought about this question as well, and to the audience member who shot it over, which really I do appreciate it for all the questions actually, but this one in particular got me to thinking about my CI career and what I would lobby for individuals who are looking maybe to move on from the Army. It's a personal decision, but I look back and what kept the hook in me. Engaged and empowered. I remember being in Iraq, and I was never more empowered or engaged to protect the Army than I was right there. That's what that was the hook right there. The passion for the craft, and to echo that, but engaged and empowered. I think that's how the Army continues to win, to keep talent from leaving. Scott, sir.
So I'd
go
add
ahead,
real
Mike.
quick, if I could, alibi. So, so 20 years we're in Iraq and Afghanistan, and you're right, forward deployed, we got that authority to do whatever we need to do. We don't have that now. We haven't had it for a few years, and we may not, hopefully, have it anytime soon. So then today's agents not having that opportunity to exercise those roles downrange, what do they turn to? I think that's kind of where the force is now, right?
We're almost back. What's old is new again. It's
Yeah,
never old. Go ahead, Scott.
That's a challenge. You know what? Maybe we could address it through talking about our next question, which is going to have to do with training, right? Just a little preamble to this training discussion. We just O'Connor just interesting to learn that he was responsible for drafting and publishing the first ever counterintelligence SQT. If everybody on this screen remembers the old SQT, right? So that was an interesting nugget that came out as part of the old training program for the Army. All right, so this next question again has to do with training. So based on your experience, and Traci, you're going to be double duty. You're first up, right? So it's going to be Traci, Glenn, Mike, then Shawn. Based on your experience, what does a truly effective, career-long counterintelligence training program, and where do you think we still fall short, today?
Well, I gave this some deep thought, and of course, that I was involved in training when I was at the Pentagon. So what I looked at as things that a good training program needs to have, and I'm surely even with the amount of work I did with training, it's probably not all inclusive, but continuously evaluated, because the threat changes, we need to change with the threat. Our training needs to be able to change as the threat evolves. We don't want to send our agents out into the field not knowing or not being aware of what the threat is, how it has changed, the history of the threat, and what it is we are designed to do. So continuously evaluated, flexible, adaptable. The example I looked at was the federal law enforcement training centers. When the threat changes, their training changes. And it's not a year or 2-year process. They can change it on a dime. That's what I really liked, among other things, about us being able to get a partnership with FLETC. The other thing is owned by the agents, not by an outside entity that is not steeped in what the current threat is, what the evolving threat is, what the past threat was, and being able to have discussions on a regular basis about what that training needs to be. And it's based on the experience of those agents out in the field. The mid-level, the senior level, the military, the civilians, everybody. One other thing, scaffolded. It needs to be continuous. It needs to build on itself. It needs to be, for lack of a better term, a crawl, walk, run. We need to make sure that the foundational is first. And once you have that foundation, build on that foundation and continuously do that. Do not have your soldiers or your agents out there needing training and not being able to get back to it. That is a problem as well. They need the training. They're in an assignment that requires such training because of the 5 functions that we are supposed to know very well. There are times when we can't get them back to the training that they need. So it needs to be available. And then it needs to be certified. And the example that I will use with that is JCTA, the Joint Counterintelligence Training Activity. For example, we have an agent who goes through the course, the Advanced Counterintelligence Investigations course, fails, not because of a personal issue, not because of a lack of integrity, but academically, they just can't cut it. There is nothing that says that that person who failed out can't go back to the resident agency from whence they came and continue to conduct investigations. That's just one example. So if we're going to have training, why not make sure that it's certified and that it means something? That when you get that certificate, it actually says that you are qualified to conduct thus and so. Now, the other piece about training that I think is important is that we need to be involved. I mean, I was on the board of governors at the Joint Counterintelligence Training Activity. I've been to a whole lot of joint certifications for our courses and other courses. And I've had the opportunity to look at training across the board, but these are the things that I think for us, we need to be able to focus on. And I think most importantly, we need to own it. It needs to be ours. That's all I have for now.
That's awesome. I love the own it piece. I wonder if everybody else on the MDCO side thinks the same thing. All right, Glenn, it's over to you, my friend.
Yes. Yeah. So, Traci, as I knew she would lay that out in the good detail that's needed because of her background and experience. And I'm going to go big bucket, right? Because Traci's already done all the detailed homework. For me, it's big bucketed in this, right? And for all the listeners out there in the military, the Army calls it PME, professional military education. It's akin to PME, right? We need MOS training and education that has a basic course, an intermediate course, an advanced course, a joint course and a combined course, right? But at minimum, you need to hit those 3 levels of basic, intermediate, and advanced. And I would offer that as we are with Flexi and other courses, JCTA, we need to be in that joint space as well. And I'm trying to figure out this technical issue. Can you hear me? Okay, you can hear me. Maybe I'm not seen. Anyway, so that's the basics of what we need, right? Basic structure needs to be in place, and I'm assuming, as Traci referenced, that those courses are real time with the training that we need in real time, that we're able to move through those with agility to reshape those with current times, and that they're properly resourced. So that's the big ask, right? Real time, properly resourced, basic, intermediate, advanced, joint, combined. And then after that, the question was, what are we missing? I think we all talk about it. We're missing the intermediate phase, right? We have, and I'm not saying that the basic nor advanced phases are perfect, because nothing is. They can use work as well, but we got this gap in the middle. You go to the basic course for the Army, you go to the basic course, and you may or may not go to the advanced course for counterintelligence, right? And we got this big gap in the middle. There's nothing else there. In fact, we have tried to work this problem several times. We have all these desperate courses out there that we could make part of the intermediate course, and not to make those courses go away, because an intermediate course will perhaps not be a certifying course for X, right? Intermediate course is not going to be the certifying course for cyber operations or whatever, right? I'm just making something up. But the intermediate course will take that agent from the basic course where they were introduced to everything, and then say, hey, we're going to refine this middle ground or this intermediate phase of where you're at and where you should be, and talk more specifically about those things in there by talking about the basics that you should already have. And then and that prepares you to go to the advanced level. And then, like I said, so forth and so on. So in short, that's how I see it. We need to have that basic structure in place. It has to be real time and resource. And we're hurting most with the void of no intermediate course, formal intermediate course, intermediate course as akin to PME, right? You got your basic PME, your intermediate PME, and your advanced, but we don't have that in place for Army counterintelligence specifically. Over.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. All good gouge. Hey, Mike, you want to pick up?
Yeah. So this hits on even a broader topic, right? So the problem we have with or an issue with Army counterintelligence is training, obviously. And so Traci knows this all too well. Glenn does. So when you talk to Fort Huachuca, right, which is the proponent for military intelligence, their job is to train all soldiers at entry level for counterintelligence or whatever type of intelligence training it is. And they often bristle, and they have in the past, about any training taking place outside of Fort Huachuca because they are proponent. They have their argument, and solidly so, is that they have to train everybody to a standard, and that's that initial standard. Perfect, got that. We've never been able to, and we've been all around for CI for 30 plus years, to get beyond that, to get to where we have an intermediate course, because it becomes a rice bowl, so to speak, right? Who's going to pay for it? When AFCITIC stood up in 1986, right? That was Army only. And as the direction that G2 said, we need some type of advanced training because the schoolhouse at Huachuca wasn't training it. And so then it became out of FCA because they had the experience and the subject matter experts, and they stood it up. And then in 2000, it became joint, and CIFA got involved and said, hey, all services, you are going to send your people to JCTA for training, or they're not for advanced training, or they're not going to get trained. And by the way, if you don't send them, it doesn't matter because we're taking your money. Your money is going to JCTA to fund it. So there was the impetus for the other services to start sending folks to JCTA to be instructors, but it forced it to happen. For the Army, we have FLETC now, right? Which is obviously is a great opportunity for us. To everybody's point, we don't have that intermediate. You go back to, ask me. I went to my basic CI training in 1990. I went to AFCITIC in 1992, and then I got a couple of other spotty classes in the 2000s and 2010s. Before I retired. How does that keep me relevant? How does it keep today's agent relevant with what's going on? Yeah, we have seminars, and they need to get after that, but there's never been a real training program. And so my hope, I've been saying this from day one with the CI transformation. The part that I believe has still not been touched yet is training and how they're going to do it. And this is Jeremy. This is where IXN Solution comes in, right? With working with AFSC, we've got the 10-day course. We also had the refresher course, right? That allowed them to send regreen folks, civilians really hadn't been out in the field doing counterintelligence investigations, to go back to a field office. Something like that on scale really needs to be done. And I think the onus right now, if the Army is going to stick with, until such time that there is a national level counterintelligence organization is going to mandate and run everything, then Army's going to do what it should do. And through CI command says, this is what we're going to do for training to get everybody up on board. Eventually, I think it falls under, whatever that organization is going to be in CSC or whatever it's going to be. And training has got to be part of that. And they're going to mandate it because everybody does it differently. CI for Marine Corps is different than NCIS. And it's disparate, right? So to me, that's a huge tentacle to not only give authority to whatever national level, who's that, we're going to own the CI tradecraft, as you coined it. Training is part of that. And it should be, I think, all together. In the interim, until we get there, then I think CI Command has that. And I'm optimistic that that's what they're looking to do, is to get everybody kind of reblued that. What is that level of training through different steps? We had, different programs, whether it's the SIP program, levels that down at those regions, those RSAC levels, how are they training, making sure those people are there so we don't go back to having IO issues down the road or something. So that's kind of where I'm sitting with that. Army CI has it right now. This is the perfect timing to implement what they have until such time, but it's a push to make it a bigger issue for the entire community.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. And that was a great little history lesson there too on the sort of evolution of advanced training. I appreciate that. Shawn, hey, why don't you bring us home on the topic?
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad I get to hear all these pros talk before I jumped into this one, because I've scrapped everything I wanted to say about training here. Based off the amazing stuff like I was going to talk about, we know it's training, education, and experience, and you bring that all together, and that's part of your talent cultivation over time. But there's a couple things that I heard in here that I just really wanted to accentuate. I love what Traci said about, like, how do you take someone who has put themselves out there in a voluntary school, did not pass and certify, and then they go back to the field, right? Like, this is an optional school, and if we fail people and then it has a negative stigma, you're going to have all these people who don't volunteer to go to the training, and so we end up in this terrible loop, right? So we've got to figure out, like, what does an intermediate and maybe even an advanced curriculum look like, and then what of that becomes mandatory and what of that becoms optional. And I believe it's the Marine Corps, but I'm not 100% on this, but I think they require collections if you're going to become a warrant officer in Marine Corps CI Human, right? I think they require that. So looking at some of those models and thinking about those things, because you're right, Mike, you went through your advanced training in 1992. I went through in 1995. I know I went through after Traci went through her advanced training, so she was probably in there prior to me and all that good stuff. And what is available then? This is supposed to be my advanced training. Where's the next? And I'll tell you from my experience what that really means. My advanced training wasn't my advanced training. That was my certification to do some advanced things. But my real advanced training was when I returned to JCTA as an instructor and revisited the curriculum and revisited everything that I was supposed to do, but now with the context of multiple tours, I then was like, this is real advanced training, right? Because I was learning, and I know, Jeremy, you were doing the same role, and you and I have talked about this. That's where I really learned how to lead, right at first level, at the conduct level, how to really lead those men and women, because I had the context and I could refer back to the doctrine and the TTPs and apply judgment and experience to it. So you guys have convinced me today that we got to figure out how to have an intermediate curriculum, an advanced curriculum. Components of that for the Army need to be like what is required and what is optional. And I'll deeply tie that to warrant officer progression, because I think that's important. So that's what I have on that. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Shawn. I think we need to put a parachute on all of you, push you right back into the Pentagon so you can go in and fix training for the Army. All right, we'll roll back. Jeremy, pick it up from here.
Hey, I appreciate it, Scott. That was fantastic, team. I do want to echo a couple of different things. I was looking up for this question, the Secretary of the Army's priorities, and two really stick out to me: the combat lethality and modernization. I've said it a couple different times. When I think modernization for SIGINT, they buy a new widget. Same with Emmett. When I think about counterintelligence and really human intelligence, modernization to me in combat lethality is arming the agent and the case officer on the ground through training. And you guys have just highlighted that. And I think that there is a critical need. We need to be better about training and equipping the force. Shameless plug, and thank you, Mike, for doing it. One for IXN. That's what we do. We have a huge bench of individuals out there that do just this in all different 5 functions of the counterintelligence craft. We are here to help. We continue to bleed Army green, and we'll help anybody within the counterintelligence profession just be better. Modernize, it's done through training. And in this vein, the next question is very similar, and it really ties to the first question that we had in episode 1. And let's chat about it. There's a notable disparity in counterintelligence training across agencies. Do you see value in having the Department of War serve as the executive agent for CI training beyond the initial training, while allowing agencies to maintain their own foundational programs? And how could this approach improve readiness and interoperability? The order: Glenn, Shawn, Mike, Traci. Glenn, over to you.
Yes, Jeremy. So yeah, perfect segue from the previous question, right? So to me, the answer is yes. Do I see value to the Department of War, having this level of training as the executive agent? Yes. But then I also say, again, let's look at the existing structure and see how can we get there faster, right? Perhaps. And so then I come back and this is not a shameless plug for the organization. It's just the fact of where we're at. But, if DIA is supposed to be the enterprise manager, then DIA needs to be the enterprise manager. And so we can either start from DIA and put teeth behind them being the enterprise manager and the executive agent for training in this way, or we could build it at the Department of War elsewhere. Yes, my answer is yes, either way. But my answer is also caveated by exactly the latter part of the question, which was while allowing agencies to maintain their own foundational programs. Absolutely critical. Until we have one national counterintelligence effort, we still have many. And as we've talked about throughout this conversation, they're all trained differently. They're all, doing different stuff. The Army is the only one that's CI-centric. And so that latter part is very, it has to be highlighted as a part of NES to this for me, right? So, and then the last part, let's see. What do we gain from it? Or let's see, how does it improve readiness and interoperability? It is the definition of interoperability when you put us together, right? When you go joint, combined, see, no, do, right? We understand each other better, right? You put us in the same room, you give us the same training, we have all the same discussions in that room. Now I understand why you think the way you think as a agency within the U.S. or a country as an allied partner, right? So the interoperability is absolutely achieved through our synergy and unity of effort in this proposed training. Over.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn. Spot on. Someone, again, going back to the first question, needs to own the tradecraft, the policy, and the skill sets. Counterintelligence is being taught differently at the foundational level across a big spectrum. It's time to ring that in. Shawn, please.
Yeah, so 100%. Yes, there's real value in the Department of War being the one to take this burden on for the entire USG. And it comes back to the earlier comment on we're resourced, we have the people, and we already have the training structure in place, and we're doing some of these things. I really agree with what Glenn says on that. You can't have it's not one or the other. Each organizations need to have their own foundational training and things specific to their mission, right? And then I think you need a core, advanced, or even intermediate curriculum that everyone can attend across the whole of government, right? So we've seen it work. HUMIT does it. Federal law enforcement does it with FLETC, right? They all go. So CI doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. I think we just got to figure out how to do this for ourselves. And it's especially important when we have, finally one person in charge of us. And I think that's gonna help significantly. For the skeptics out there, which there always are, I'm not advocating one size fits all. I'm not advocating that organizations lose control of their foundational certification and training, right? Those things still matter, but there are examples out there. For example, again, family, state police officers in my home state of Maine. Every full-time law enforcement officer attends one common basic academy: municipal, sheriffs, state police. But then the state police stay for additional mission-specific training. It kind of makes sense, right? So other organizations have figured these things out, and I think it's time for us to do so. And CI needs, we got to get engaged everywhere, right? Adversary, I told you, whole of society. We know that's happening. It's all hands on deck, and I think that matters. And if we look at infantry doctrine, right, what does it teach us? You don't attack a prepared enemy without at least 3-to-1 advantage. In counterintelligence, your investigations question early on, Jeremy, right? We're losing. We need everyone from every agency with every slice of counterintelligence authority, from the Department of Education all the way to the Department of War, engaged. And I'll tell you, we touched on it, I think, a little bit earlier too. Like, state counterintelligence is coming, because at the state and local level, we're seeing issues, right? And news recently, biolab in Vegas. It's insane, right? New Hampshire has House Bill 1605 that's up. Florida, you guys got House Bill 945 up. Those are 2 states that are getting ready to set up counterintelligence organizations. They're going to need training. They're going to need experience, all those things. So I think it's time to have an executive agent for training in CI. And I think the Department of War, based off our numbers, based off of our track record, based on our history of counterintelligence dating back to 1775, I think we're the ones that are ready to do it. Over.
Yeah, spot on. I agree, Shawn. But you throw state counterintelligence programs in on there, and again, it's going to complicate things. But I think it leans, my own personal opinion, to saying the federal government's just not doing enough. We're going to take matters in our own hand.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of, like, I'm talking to pros about this, and it's cool. These are cool conversations, and people are like, but what about this? But about, those are all valid concerns. You can't just stand something up at the states from nothing. There's a training deficit. There's funding. There's all sorts of things. There's, these can't be spooky intel organizations, but counterintelligence cops on the beat, those aren't spooky intel organizations. It's no different than a drug task force or a vice task force, right? And of course, legislation is going to have to happen that there's a state law you're breaking. It has to be illegal to be an agent of a foreign power, or to buy a water treatment facility, or for China to invest in kids' textbooks K through 12. That's got to be illegal, right? So the state can enforce it at the state level. So there's a lot of work to be done. But I love having these conversations because it gets people thinking about it, and hopefully, someone's going to get it across the finish line. And then we're going to do the same thing we did with, what is it, Section 7377, crawl, walk, run at the state level. That's how it's going to roll out. So, over.
Spot on, Shawn. Thank you. Mike, baton is yours, sir.
Yeah, great points. And at the end of the day, it's like, we control what we can control, right? So, I fear, we never want to see something, a change due to, something bad happening. But, counterintelligence failures across, whether it's at a state level, federal level, the Army, DOD level, just imagine, if you will, for a second, that something bad happens, right? And somebody looks into the processes and says, hey, DOD, hey, United States government, what's your training and certification for all this how did we let this happen? And there's going to be a lot of finger pointing. People are like, it's not me, right? We got to get beyond it. First of all, I think that I go back to what I said earlier. The Department of War is for the military services by far. That do it, right? So CIFA stood up and they said all training, all advanced training is going to be JCTA, period. That's how it was. If you didn't like it, sorry, that's just how it was. The Department of Work can issue guidance and say, this is how it's going to be. Change is hard, right? And some people aren't going to be happy. Let's be part of, let's hope that the seniors that are involved are part of that discussion and don't just keep pushing back against it. Because if you keep sticking your head in the sand, it's going to move on without you. And you want to be part of the solution rather than just be told what to do. We all I think if you pull this question to all the services, they're going to say the same thing. We all recognize this is a problem. So what are we going to do about it? Army has been doing it, for a long time because that's what we do as counterintelligence agents. Doesn't mean we have to lead it, but we have a lot of experience there. So, let's get the group. Hopefully somebody get a group together and say, yes, we need to consolidate this. We have to look at training, and it has to be a priority. And it has to be, I think, any type of CI strategy that's eventually developed, training, education has to be part of that. And so everything that, Shawn said before and Glenn as well, I completely agree with. Over.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And Traci, bring us home.
Well, one of the things that was an effort when I was in the Pentagon, and it was probably 3 or 4 years before I retired, DIA came up with the concept that they wanted to control foundational training. And so for all of the services, we all got together and we were all, heck no, we are not willing to give that up. So we had to convince DIA that foundational training should remain with the services because we do CI differently. With regards to the intermediate, which of course there is a gap there, and we do have JCTA for the advanced, I know DIA was looking at taking over the training process for the CI and also coming up with continuing education and a certification program. If you are an agent, for instance, and I'm doing this from memory. If you are a CI agent, every couple of years you need to recertify, similar to the SQT that we used to have. We needed to certify as we progressed in our career because things change. And you need to know what is the current policy procedure as we move forward and what our jobs entail as they evolve. So I don't know where that process is now. I don't know if it died on the vine. With regards to joint certifications, we know JCTA or the JCE, the joint coordination element, was responsible for those. Interesting fact was that our course, our foundational course at Fort Huachuca, was the only one that was joint certified. And that was something that Robin Cook, someone who you probably all know, took on as her mantle in, I think, 2016 to ensure that, the CI Special Agent course or the CI Agent course was joint certified. So we were ahead on that. And we found out that there was a reason why some of the other services, to include the Coast Guard, wanted to get in on our training. With regards to DOW taking over, I can support that right now because they are the only entity that would be able to pull that together and have all the services under one umbrella and the training be common across the board. And as long as they had the right people inputting what that curriculum should look like. And CSC can't do it right now. I think that's what Glenn said. They don't have the wherewithal to do that right now. They don't have the resources, and the DOW is the best choice for that. I think that DIA still has a stake in it because if I'm not mistaken, they were looking at updating at least their minimum CI training standards document. And if you can believe it, while we were going through that process, the most recent version was from 2014. And that is scary. So when you have training programs like this and you have entities that want to take it over, they need to stay on the ball. They need to ensure that those standards are reviewed periodically and not even every 2 years. It needs to be at least once a year. As soon as you publish the one, you need to be looking at the next one publishing a year later, because to have a minimum training standards requirement that is from 2014 is kind of scary when you think about it. So if the DOW can improve on that, if we can maintain our foundational training, because we all do things differently right now, I don't disagree with that at this point. Over.
Yeah, well said, Traci. You know what? Modernize through training, professionalize the CI enterprise. It needs to happen. The adversary is engaged every day, and we need a professionalized force to counter what they're doing. Hey, team, we're coming up on again time. I'll pass over to Scott for one more question, and then we'll close it down. Scott, over to you, sir.
Yeah. So we want to get a little bit more personal with you guys, right? For as we start coming to the close here, right? So, so these the order for these questions is going to be Mike, Traci, Glenn, and then Shawn. And one of the questions that we had from LinkedIn that came in was, what are some, either innovative ways that you sort of, powered through some issues, or maybe what was a hardship that you had to overcome through your career? So how did you either overcome a hardship or use, some sort of innovative solution, to get over an issue that came up with your career? Maybe one story from each of you would be good. And we'll start with Mike.
Oh, wow. That's a tough one to go first on. Well, that's a good question. Innovative ways or hardships. I think for me personally, it was realizing that, I could only affect where I stood. I could only, being able to do my part of the job and down, right? I couldn't impact necessarily 3 levels up, right? Other than providing context, in my written, documents and stuff like that. I think, and I talked about it in my episode. I think the biggest hardship I had, it really had to do with the mentorship part when the activity went through our phase where we were shut down, right? And how did as the deck commander, operations officer at the time, how were we able to bring the team together that were focused and trained to do a certain function, and they couldn't do that anymore? How do we move forward with that? That was something that was unplanned, right? That's a adverse reaction to something that none of us had ever thought could happen. But how do we get through it? And I think that and it wasn't something I did personally, right? It was a team of teams, and it was working with really the civilians and folks there to say, how are we going to get through this together? Because we will overcome this situation. We don't like where we are with it, but it's here. And we know that we got to move forward with it. So what are we going to do? So for me personally, I think I would say that was a hardship, but it was a lesson learned as well. It's like I realized that it was not something I was going to be able to solve myself. And it really took the team of everybody there, the leaders and the folks on the floor, to help us all go together and figure out, okay, we're gonna get through this. Because it was something we never would have expected would have happened, but it just happened, and there it was. And so a little bit different, but that's, I guess, if I had to pick a hardship, that's what I would have over.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really reminds me a little bit of a term that comes from trying to countering influence. Outrage is oxygen. And CI's job to stamp out stamp it out. Not debate it, right? So you have to come up with a way to get past it, right? So that was definitely a hardship. I'm glad y'all came out on the good side of that one. So very cool. Next in the chute, Traci.
Well, I was enlisted when this happened. It was something that kind of took me aback, and I had to realize in this particular hardship, and it was a personal hardship and a professional one as well, that I had to let my reputation speak for itself. My last name was Lacey back then, so I was Traci Lacey back then, and I was the East Coast POC, point of contact, for MI applications, for the CI applicants. And so when I was speaking to a young soldier that actually was at Fort Meade, which was where I was at the MI detachment. And Shawn, you may remember a little bit about this. And there was a sergeant major from another battalion who questioned my integrity based on a soldier that he wanted to become a CI agent. And there were some things within her packet that just did not look right. And I didn't want her to send it up the way it looked. And the first thing that kind of threw me was that the sergeant major came over to talk to me and tell me about how this person wanted to be an agent. And I told him what was required. And so she came over. But when I told her what was wrong with her packet and the ways that she could improve it, I think the message got misconstrued, and there was an informal EO complaint or an EO statement made in front of a sister battalion about me. And because I was one of very few female staff sergeants with the last name of mine, everybody, I think, who knew me figured out who he was talking about. And so I had to preempt and go to my sergeant major with my captain from the detachment and explain what happened. But the gratifying thing, and this is something that I learned, because my colleagues at the time, some of my coworkers at the time said, well, what are you going to say? What are you going to do? And I said, I'm not going to say anything. I think it'll only make things worse. I wanted to say something so bad because it was my reputation at stake. But instead, I just kind of I had to let my reputation speak for itself. And eventually it became a non-issue. But I realized at that point that, and I was the detachment NCOIC, I had to realize that I wasn't going to put fuel on that fire for the sake of the unit, for the sake of that sergeant major as well, and for the sake of that soldier who came to me. And that was just something that I had to learn as a professional, that was a tough one for me, because it was the first time I ever had to deal with someone maligning my name. So I just had to let it run its course. And it took a couple years for it to run its course eventually. Initially, when people knew who it was, when they found out it was me, they were very supportive, because based on the relationships I had with people, there was serious doubt as to the fact that I could actually even do something like that. But I had to learn in that silence sometimes speaks louder than retaliation or anger, and you have to stay calm in situations like that. So I was able to carry that over as a warrant officer, and the point of that is that when people saw me angry, they knew I was really, really angry. They knew that my hair was on fire because I tried to stay calm. So the CI in my name stands for counterintelligence, but it also stands for, in a lot of instances, calming influence.
That's awesome.
I thought you were going to say, "See, I told you," but that's okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great story. And you know what? I mean, I hope that story resonates, especially with young folks, right? I mean, who you are as a person, and combined with sort of that professional reputation that you develop as being, somebody that is trustworthy and gets the job done. I mean, it carries so much weight throughout your career. So, and it came into play there for sure. So Glenn, why don't you pick it up from there?
Yeah. So, I looked at this question and, I thought I'd take a broader approach to it, like a personal story, if you will, because it's the broader approach that kind of hit both sides of this, innovative and hardships for me, wherein I experienced some personal hardships along the way that tie back to broader themes. And so, I started my career, and I tell people, the first roughly almost 20 years of my career, I'd say 17 and a half, probably be more exact. I spent out in, what we call the tactical army, right? I kept saying, man, the Army they just want to keep putting a ruck on my back. They don't want to let me go get any taste of that thing called INSCOM or anywhere else, right? And so my innovation and hardships came from those assignments, right? I learned right out of the gate of Fort Huachuca. My very first assignment went to the 1st Infantry Division Forward, and at that time was in Göppingen, Germany, in the Stuttgart community. And it was my very first assignment. And I walk in, I'm a brand new agent, newly promoted to sergeant out of the course. And I get there, and my shop, right, my counterintelligence shop, if you will, or my team, was pretty much decimated. The warrant officer, some of you know, he's got a great reputation out there. So I'll throw his name out there. Good old Andy Schweissgood. Andy Schweissgood won't likely remember me because as I arrived, he was departing, and I think we did a high five virtually, right? And then my NCOIC, unfortunately, I don't remember her name at this time, but it was for the same reason. She took a pregnancy chapter, or again, life happens for all the right reasons, and she disappeared. And next thing I know, there's the brand new CIA agent out of the course who's being thrown in charge of, basically CI for 1st Infantry Division Forward. Many of you know a guy by the name of Dennis Desmond. Dennis Desmond was a captain in the G2 shop. He was the senior CI officer at the time. And so Dennis and I came together and put together a great team. So we talk about innovation or innovative and hardships. It was a shock to my system to graduate from the course and then all of a sudden get out there and the leadership disappears above me, the seniors, right? The experience, et cetera, et cetera. So what did I quickly learn from that? And I had some really good instructors in the course who hit these themes as we were going through the agents course. And Traci and I went through the same time. She was in the class just ahead of me. So we were there at the same time. And those instructors would hit on things outside of the basics of the curriculum. Things like you need to know policy. You need to know all the regulations, right? You need to have initiative. You need blah, 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 right? So I learned quickly the value of creating a network, developing an enterprise of professionals that could assist me. I'll throw a shout out here to Cecil Dildine. He was in a different organization at the time. He was one of the first people to reach out to me and say, hey, Glenn, I got you, right? I've been working with the team from my unit, and I know what you're going through because, folks have moved on, and I got you. And so to this day, I haven't seen Cecil. I saw that he took a promotion or something here recently on LinkedIn, and I applauded it. But I've got this warm spot in my heart for Cecil Dildine because of what he did for me in that time of need, right, for the profession. I learned so much from him from the jump. So I learned that the value of collaboration, the value of a network, the value of understanding that you are a team among teams, right? Many people know I'll cite some cliche type stuff, and some people don't like that. But I only cite the things that are near and dear to my heart because I learned what that means, right? You are a team among teams. I said it earlier. Rarely, if ever, should you go alone. And you're not alone. You're never alone. So team. In our previous fireside chat, I talked a lot about investing in people. And so because I learned to invest in people early, and because people were investing in me, that's how I got through my hardships. But the innovation came from understanding that I don't know it all. And I got that lesson. I got that lesson in humility and humbleness in my very first assignment out of the course, thrown into a position where I'm supposed to know pretty much everything, and I didn't, right? And so I'm reaching out to other people to help me with that. And there were some warrants that I reached out to during that time, and made lifetime friends with them to this day. So it taught me, hey, reach out, and it also taught me understand what all the members of the team. And the members of the team is not just your organization. It's the other organizations. It's the intelligence, law enforcement, security community. Learn what your other partners do, what they're responsible for, what their capabilities are. How do you apply that to your problem set, etc. So that's where the innovation came in, is that I learned that, hey, man, I don't know it all, but guess what? I'm going to create a network of people who do. I'm also going to create a network of capability that now I know you have capability I don't, and I'm going to invite you to the table. All right. And we are going to execute this mission, and we're going to win, and we're going to be successful because I thought team, not me. Right. Someone says there's no I in team. That's where we're going with that. So that very first assignment really, really taught me all of that. From that, when we talk about hardships, yes, I experienced some hardships along the way. And as I think about it, I will simply say this to summarize those hardships. Most of the time, it was because someone in the ecosystem, as Mike said earlier, sometimes we're our own worst enemy, right? Most of the time, it was because someone in my own ecosystem of the enterprise of fellow professionals challenged my character. That's where my hardships came in. When folks would challenge my character in the sense of, I said it earlier, QIA. Okay, bring it. QIA, I'm doing my job, but because you wear a different unit patch, right? Don't get me started on that. Traci knows I retired fighting that fight about, hey, guys, I'm still a Army counterintelligence special agent, same badge, same CW5 Jones that used to be over there, just working over here now, right? Let's not get into the unit patch. That's what my hardships would come behind, when people would challenge my character and challenge because of a patch or a unit or an organization that I wasn't in, challenge authorities, right? And things like that. But then I go back to fall back on know your policy, know your regulation, know your job. And I think Shawn said it earlier, know your job, do your job, right? And do it well. And so in that, I was always able to defeat hardships, right? I was always able to defeat those. And again, I never went alone, right? Even in a hardship, I went to mentors, I went to fellow colleagues, and I said, hey, let's make sure my azimuth is pointing due north, right? Because this is what's going on, this is what I'm doing, let me get a little sanity check. So never alone. And I'm just going to stop there. Character is everything. Character is everything. Thank you. Over.
Awesome, Glenn. And I really love that you set up so that Shawn can't say, know your job, do your job. So
Actually, I want to clarify.
Shawn, it's, you're going to bring us home.
I want to clarify all that. You're not quoting Shawn. I was quoting Bill Belichick. It's do your job. We got to get that right. I'm in New England. Someone will show up to my house and we're going to get in a fight. Do your job.
That's Hall of Famer, isn't he? Bill.
Jesus. Yeah. Okay, Denver. So I'll bring that home. So first, I think Jeremy, you guys we're cutting off after this question, right? Which, we're at the 3 hour and 34 minute mark, which is normally the intermission during Glenn's retirement speech. So we're only halfway there, according to Glenn. But hey, thanks to Brad in LinkedIn land for this question, on innovative ways to conduct CI and some hardships in counterintelligence. It's a question that kind of makes you reflect. And I'll tell you, on the innovation side, that's the easy one first, right? I think a lot of innovation comes from experience. I've always said, if you don't engage, you don't learn, right? So get out there and engage. there's no such thing as a bad interview. You can mess up an interview, but it's not a bad interview, right? Because you're going to learn. And the more interviews you do, the more you engage, the better you become, the more you can see around corners, experiences our night vision. That gets you set up for success, right? So that's how you really innovate, and you're able to engage in a way that you couldn't back here. So that's what I say. That's what you got to do to be innovative. And like all of us on this screen, there are folks going, oh man, these damn warrants could talk for almost 4 hours. I'll turn that right into, you know what that is? That's interview stamina. Every one of us has done this for a career. This is interview stamina. This is what we do, right? A 4-hour interview is normal, right? That's not a long day. So just take I'd say take that under advisement. So that's my piece on innovation. Hardship, I'll say for hardship, look, most of mine weren't dramatic. There's folks in listener land that are like, oh, they're going to talk about the time of troubles. Oh, we're going to do that. I'll tell you, all of that I just been is there's organizational friction that happens, and it's not that big of a deal. In the grand scheme of things, none of that is a big deal. It's just something you went through at the time, right? I don't know if it's just resiliency or what, but there isn't a day that I wake up and I look back at the Army and go, man, that organizational friction drugged me down. Man, these problems not at all. I look at it the other way. I learned so much, and I have so much to be grateful for that. Honestly, I got one hardship that I went through, and Jeremy, you know it. We lost a dude, right? Medical event downrange. That was pretty hard. That was it. So one thing. So that's it. Other than that, things have been absolutely phenomenal. It was an honor to go through that with you, Jeremy. It was an honor to deliver a commander's letter to a father and a mother with you, a trusted teammate. But other than that, there's no real hardships because they all pale in comparison. And on that, I'll always say tip of a hat. I waited to the end, so I didn't get a little too loose on here, but I waited in to crack open this Horse Soldier bottle of bourbon here with some sort of signature on it that I think you may have given to me, Jeremy, but I'm not 100% sure. It's the second anonymous gift you figured out how to get to me. But I poured it, and I wanted to say, on that, cheers to our warrant officer, and I'll always be grateful to 2 sergeant majors, Corey and Mark, right, who really took care of an exceptional chief when it mattered most. So that's the only hardship I ever had, man. So it's good to honor that guy here and kind of do a little bit of a toast to another warrant officer. So cheers, Jeremy.
Yeah, cheers. I'll echo that right to Eli. One of the greatest professionals I've ever met. Rock and roll, brother. I know you're watching down. Continue to protect the force out there and continue to impart that.
That's good bourbon.
Hey, real quick pause. I'll edit this out. How are we doing for time? Does everybody still have time?
Yeah, I'm good. I don't care.
Tracy's falling asleep.
Amy just got home and
yelling
she's
at me.
making me dinner. I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
Hey, so-
I'm good.
Okay, you're good.
Please don't edit that out. Please don't edit that out. Ma, meatloaf. Did you just see that? Ma.
Here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to send over a new StreamYard link because I think the capacity is a 4-hour recording. So I don't most certainly want us to get into it and then have to restart. So I'm going to send over a new link. We're going to close this one out. It's going to be very quick, and then I'll actually send the link to y'all right now and log in after this. All right, break. Team, this has been a fantastic conversation as always. I appreciate your sage wisdom, the time and dedication you put into just putting the answers together and the responses. I'm really looking forward to part 3 as we continue the conversation. And for our audience, little teaser, we have some pretty good questions up and coming, and some individuals provided some funny stories. So stand by. Scott, over to you. All right, we can pause. Hey guys, I'm going to stop recording. Scott, we're just going to edit that the exit out.